Good evening and welcome to the Hanson Economic Development Committee meeting of June 26, 2024. Technically, you are,
Just letting you know, the other page if you want to read the preamble.
I always just freelance on this.
Works for me.
This is being recorded by Whitman Hanson Community Access Television, and playback times and other related information on this recording can be found at WHCA.TV. And at this point, I will turn it over to Mr. DeFrayis for the reorganization of the board.
Thank you, Mrs. Kemet. As in accordance with Section 1A of Article 2-1 of the Hanson General Bylaws, all boards and committees must reorganize after the town meeting. So therefore, I am seeking a nomination for the chair of the Economic Development Committee for 1 year.
I'd like to nominate Laura to be the chair for another go at it. And I think she's doing a great job, so I'd like to see her continue if she would accept that nomination.
So I have a
Mr. Coleman.
I have a nomination from Mr. Cohen. Do I have a second on that nomination? Second that nomination by Mr. Ernst.
I thought I'd have to arm wrestle somebody.
I'm gonna ask for a roll call vote. Mr. Ernst,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kemet, you are now the Economic
I
Development.
can vote too, by the way.
Can you?
Yes,
Would you like to vote?
yes. I can also nominate myself, which
Okay.
it's very,
Would you like to vote for yourself?
yes, I would like to
Okay,
vote for
great.
myself.
So we have a 3-0-0 vote. Mrs. Kemet, you are now the Economic Development Chairman.
Oh, I feel like I have to use the gavel, which I never do. So I will entertain a motion for the vice chair.
I would nominate Kevin Cohen for vice chair.
Okay, and I will second that.
All right, thanks.
Are you willing to accept?
I'm willing to
the
accept,
sash?
yes.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, well, that was pretty speedy. All right, that brings us to,
Do you want to nominate a clerk?
sorry,
You have to
clerk?
nominate a clerk,
Oh, yes.
because you actually are a 5-member board.
Yes, well, we are. I will entertain a motion for clerk.
And I'll nominate Chris to be
Okay.
the clerk.
I'll accept the nomination.
Okay, you'll accept the rose?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, so that brings us to approved meeting minutes from March 20th, 2024. Did everybody have an opportunity to take a look at those? Okay. It's hard to believe that's the last time we met. Oh,
Yeah, I know, it's
I'm gonna dust this off. Not that we haven't had other meetings, all of us, but yeah.
I'll make a motion to accept the meeting minutes, date of March 20th.
Awesome.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, well, we're clipping right along, and then that brings us to South Shore Chamber of Commerce. And with us is, I believe, Peter Foreman. All right, great, thank you so much. We're wildly excited to have you here this evening. And I don't know, Mr. DeFrayis, if you wanted to kind of...
Well, we asked Mr. Foreman if he had some time to just speak with the Economic Development Committee, maybe give an idea of what maybe working with South Shore, and let's say some pointers, if you will, for the Economic Development Committee as far as outreach and where the committee would like to go and how we could get there.
Yeah, we're really, in our extreme infancy. We don't know what we want to be when we grow up. We've got some ideas, but we're not, 100% on that. So we would love to hear from you.
Great. Well, by background, the chamber is one of the largest chambers in the state, but we have a subsidiary organization of Economic Development Corporation, so structured a little differently. The primary purpose has been to drive a regional economic strategy that we developed about 7 or 8 years ago for our view of our economic regional area. And the idea was, how do we become a more competitive economic region to drive wealth, more job opportunities, and in turn, stronger communities and community service. That's been driven largely by a housing agenda 5 to 7 years ago, trying to diversify the housing stock on the South Shore to bring younger people into the area, which will be the workforce and future entrepreneurs, and to provide more options for existing residents who may want to downsize. But the traditional zoning, traditional detached four-bedroom, is out of reach and not of interest to a lot of new people moving out of the cities or moving into the state, and that's what boomers are trying to get out of now. A lot of things right now would block that, and there are interest rates freezing people in place. But it was a housing and it was a people in place strategy. Preserve your towns, have high quality of life and services, bring new talent, and your economy will grow. What we didn't do is try to do the sort of target a business sector and say, that's the sector we want to grow, that's the sector we want to try to attract. We don't get into business recruitment. We're a small economic development. It really is an arm of the chamber. So what we have is a lot of business voices that we think bring some perspective of economic growth. And our economic corporation is just in its young stages of being able to get government grants and provide some assistance to towns, or to be a conduit that can apply on behalf of towns for potential grants. We have done some work, almost always at the invitation of towns who are trying to think about their economic development and would like to get some private sector help, and think through what they're doing, maybe outside validation, see how it compares to other areas. I don't know what you're looking at for a roadmap, but I always advise towns a few things when they are looking, and that is, you're not an island, so one starting point is to think what is around you and what's in the region and where are those strengths. Look at what you think your natural assets are. Don't get too headstrong about business recruitment and trying to reimagine yourself as the world headquarters from some new industry sector that's getting a lot of attention.
Right.
And competing. Before you start to think a lot about who you're going to recruit in, think a little bit and take inventory of who have you said no to, and who's knocked on your door, if anyone in the town, and what is that process like. I mentioned the housing strategy, but we're also now expanding that into infrastructure, looking a lot at water. So we've helped fund, provided some matches to the Old Colony Planning Council that's now in the process of a big water study, and we're doing some looking into intermunicipal water discussions, sort of in the northern part, more the Weir River watershed area. But willing to try to help where we can, knowing that we don't have technicians on staff. People get planning councils, so you get contracts to hire people. But what we can do is offer some thought and assistance as to what we're seeing in other areas, what we think the region is, how things might tie into our regional plan. And to help you as you're applying for grants, we get a lot of requests to provide letterhead support for grants. And really what we can end up doing there is help put what looks to many communities as a very local oriented grant, and we'll look at it and say, it actually ties into a much larger regional agenda, which often ties into state agendas, which I think sometimes helps a little bit when these grants are being done.
We should disclose that our community did not vote favorably for the MBTA community. And the planning board is looking at it yet again, because our deadline is the end of the year.
Yes.
We have relied quite heavily on state grants, which many of which may no longer be available to us. And I've been told that the governor and others are even looking at expanding into more grants that would not be available if one is not MBTA compliant.
Yeah,
So I just thought, in the interest of full disclosure, there may still be grants that are available, but a lot of them have been taken off of the table.
it is a growing, I spent 20 years in the legislature representing Plymouth during the high growth urban flight period, fighting growth, so kind of with the background. But there is a national and state, there's a growing national and state concern about the need for more housing, and housing variety, multifamily, smaller units. And growing concern that those state and national agendas imperative for economic growth are being held up because of local approval process and zoning and the difficulty of getting the approval. So you're going to see more pressure from the state getting at this zoning. Now, some of that we have supported. We were very vocal supporters of the housing choice law, which allowed majority vote instead of 2/3 for rezoning in certain districts. We commented on the MBTA. It was done very quickly in the budget. We did not take a formal position on it, but we did provide a 4-page comment letter on the regs. Some of that coming out of conversations Tony and I had. We contacted every planning director in our area to see how this was going to work. And while we support the housing, we have spoken to the governor, lieutenant governor, housing secretary, so we support it. We know we have got to overcome local opponents who oppose any type of housing, almost always for the wrong reasons. But the state's got to be aware that the formulas don't always work in every town, and there's got to be more flexibility to encourage the types of housing that we think makes sense for economic growth, but you also need to respect the resources, the capability of the towns to support it, and where it should go. In some cases, I'm not sure the right place is always next to the train station. In Hanson's case, though, I would hope the planning board goes back, and I would hope town meeting takes another look at it, because one of the great assets I think you do have here is with the rail station. You've got a great opportunity to attract younger professionals down, and transit-oriented development. I think it's going to be attractive. My sense is, without looking at data, that Hanson is becoming a more attractive town. I just keep running into younger professionals at the chamber who tell me they can move to Hanson.
Oh, well, I wish they would get engaged with the town, but
A couple of them have been.
I hope so.
They've been on some of the committees,
Okay, I hope so. I think Patrick Powers has
Yes.
been, yeah.
and he's on our board.
Yeah, he's awesome. Organically, it seems as though it's happening regardless of the MBTA community. We do have private developers that are investing in that general area. We've got one particular nut to crack there, which we're working on enforcement orders with. It's a very large building that's in a state of rapid disrepair.
So along the track. on
Yes,
27.
yep. And so we've got a comprehensive group of all of our enforcement folks, Board of Health, building, fire, really tuning in because it is a health and safety issue. And it's also impeding economic growth in that area. And that is kind of a linchpin to that the whole entire area. We've got things happening on either side of it.
Yeah.
So we know that there's that sandwich effect. It's kind of,
It's a tough parcel,
Yeah.
but where you had
Yeah.
actually. And it looks like you got some mixed-use multifamily
Yes.
in there at one end already.
Yep, and so there'll be two units, I'm not sure how many units are in each one of those. People always ask me that, I'm never
It is,
quite sure. I think it's like 40, but,
For some reason, the number 49 comes to mind.
okay, I was thinking 46, but it's somewhere in the 40s. So we've got 2 buildings that will be mixed use. That's gonna be wildly exciting. We've got some existing Hanson businesses that will be expanding and going in there, and we've got some new businesses that they're attracting. So it's a perfect combination, in terms of growth for some businesses, attracting new businesses, attracting some new residents, most likely commuters because of the location. So we're pretty excited about that. When we've talked about, what would we think would make Hanson attractive, we really feel like ecotourism is a pretty important part of us. Burridge is, I don't know if you're aware of the Burridge wildlife area, but it's 1,600 acres. It's in Hanson and Halifax. The primary.
Is that the trailhead I saw on
No,
27?
no, this is a little off the beaten path to get there. But people come from all over the state. And we have 2 buildings that were gifted to us that are contiguous to that property. And one of the things we've talked about is perhaps partnering with Mass Wildlife Fisheries. They've said maybe they'd want an education center there. We already know that there's a lot of traffic coming there. And we don't know what the other building could be used for, but that's, something that we've thought about. One of the grants that Mr. DeFrayis has worked on is some connectivity from the MBTA to Burridge by what were we calling that, a boardwalk, I guess?
Boardwalk, yeah.
A boardwalk, so that you could literally come right off the train and kind of find a way to connect to Burridge. And we know that we have a lot of really great conservation property, which, as you know, on the South Shore is becoming extremely rare. And it's put in conservation already. It isn't, sort of like aspirationally, conservation. It's already been, it's under the care and custody of conservation. So we're a big cranberry bog, like we've got so many wetlands, and this is why this was like kind of cranberry country. But I think we always kind of come back to the ecotourism. We also have the former Plymouth County Hospital, which is up on High Street. We've torn down what was the hospital. There's an existing nurses' quarter there, but there's a group of people trying to kind of work out what will that look like, and is that yet another thing that could be used to attract people? So you've got, all of these different destinations for ecotourism, and keeping with that, Mr. DeFrayis has been working on sidewalks, because obviously people don't want to get mowed down while they're trying to enjoy the tourist features. So as you can see, grants are a major part of what the Economic Development Committee is relying upon. So we will continue to do that as long as we're able to. And there'll always be grants. It just may not be state grants. There may be other grants that we'll have to, try to pursue. So I think when you guys think about what we would really like help from the South Shore Chamber on, like, where are you guys at?
Yes.
I guess, do you interact, are there other towns on the South Shore that have economic development committees, and do you interact with them at all, and in what capacity?
Some. ED committees usually struggle. And if there's not something directly in front of them, it's A, tough to get volunteers, B, tough to figure out what you can get through various committees and boards. The ones we work with are usually focused on a very specific area that they've got. They do often try to go through this visioning of what could we do, how do we connect a residential area to a downtown or something like that. Very common problems. I think a lot struggle with trying to figure out, is there a magic bullet? And there really isn't. It's do you have a plan? Is there leadership to drive it through? And are you going to be able to get town manager, selectmen support, and then the other committees? And how does it integrate with what else is going on around you? The eco-economy one is really interesting. think through what that could be. When I think of it, the South Shore has really done a great job with some natural resources and opening up parks, and it's, I think, becoming better known for all big and small parks and the hiking. We were promoting that pretty heavily a couple of years ago in a campaign. And I don't know what it directly throws off for commerce in tax returns, but it's great for branding and drawing people to the area. You hit one town for an afternoon and then hit another town the next day if they're staying, or it's just, hey, I'm gonna do an Airbnb because I just want to build someplace. I envision it a little bit like the Cape.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, if they're not from the area, they're not going to a town, they're going to the Cape. And particularly if they're outside the area, they don't realize just how parochial everything is with all these town boundaries. It's like, no, I'm just going to the Cape because there's one charming village after another, and they all feel a little different. And I think the South Shore could have that potential, the way towns are going. But the branding of it, I think Hanson, when it is discovered by people from outside the area thinking about wanting to move into the suburbs, the perception is small, quiet, nice quality of life. And when you have amenities like these trails and parks, that only adds to it, which is nice. But that would get you back as to the industry that probably starts to throw off direct tax dollars for services is the housing industry.
Mm-hmm.
And the difficulty we've got on the South Shore is so much of the South Shore was built up through urban exodus. When it was so dramatic and did overwhelm local services, that everyone who moved down has the perception of new housing is a tax burden. And for the most part in towns, it's actually not, because people aren't having the size families they used to. So housing actually is a net gain in many cases on new tax revenue growth.
We're having a bit of a boom in over 55 housing in our town, which oddly enough, some of the over 55 condos at one point, I don't know, in the 2020s somewhere, the average cost of a condo was more than the average cost of a house. It's leveling out, but that's been a definite shift in demographics in the town. And we're seeing, of course, like all the other towns are, we're seeing the new student numbers just dropping precipitously. We don't have new little people moving to town. Yeah,
I'd be
and
concerned about that, because if the
Yeah.
reputation then becomes Hanson's a retirement community, that will affect future investment in property values in town services.
well, and we've also had some, I'd say, we're in a battle royale. We're a regional district, so we're in a battle royale with Whitman, with the schools and who's funding what. So that sort of adds to that sort of like, oh, I'm not sure if I've got a young family. Is this the town I want to, are they going to invest in the schools? We've got kind of that. Like in our dream scenario, our poster child for that Main Street, what we call like downtown. We don't really have a downtown. It's either Shaw's or like the old Ocean Spray building. Would be almost like that, like a feel like Easton. Easton's kind of our poster
Yeah.
child of, like some little shops, some restaurants, some, things that are going to attract you to maybe not live in town, but at least spend your money in town. And Easton also has a fair amount of quite excellent conservation properties. So that's kind of, where we've been kind of leaning.
Yeah, you always want some watering hole or community center. That doesn't have to be a downtown. It could be the parks, it could be the municipal buildings. It could be the coffee shops next to the rail station, who knows?
Yep.
It does not have to be a downtown crossing. It could be the field, or it could be the next town over, but people are living here. And that's fine, because if the quality of life is there. the home values are gonna go up, the tax revenues are gonna go up, and generally not a high demand on services, certainly not schools these days.
Yeah,
So it's a tough sell with a lot of older voters who remember the big boom from the 60s, 70s. But housing now is generally a net gain, and you want to try to figure out where do you put it that'll be attractive. The rail station is really attractive because you're always going to have that younger element. Graduate college, stay in the city. Once they party out,
yeah.
get to the suburbs, where can they go? You know, in somewhat reasonable commute to Boston. You get the train station right here.
Yeah.
You know, figure out where you get housing next to that.
Kevin, did you
I would
have
take
any-
another run at something rational around the MBTA law. We'd be glad to try to help with that and try to show people why housing near a train station actually makes sense and what that can do for.
I think that would be helpful with, in terms of the, working with the planning board on that. I think, people were fairly panicked. There was some widespread information that it was all low-income
always
housing.
is,
You know
yes.
the
It's
tactics.
always the-
You know the tactics. And I think people didn't fully appreciate that the planning board had really put in a lot of due diligence and thoughtfulness about where they were going to locate this. And so although, technically, I think we're required to build 750,
No, you're required to zone.
which, right, I'm sorry, that's what I meant. Even though the zone was required to support 750 units, in reality, because of wetlands, the fact we don't have town sewer, et cetera, that number was not going to be reached. And I know that's the case with most communities. But people just absolutely lost their minds about it. And the reality of it is that most of it would be the building that we talked about that we really need to clean up. It would be right in that area. And that had already been approved for housing years ago. I don't know if it was under Mr. Marangello or a prior owner, but there were already permits in place for him to build housing there. This just would simply allow that to count towards the MBTA community and the zone. So, and then the other thing, the folks that were really against the MBTA community are also the same folks who are against 40B. And it's like, I mean, I understand, we all moved here, like, of course, we would like to all stop time in some ways and say, this is the perfect little town that I moved into, and but with the housing demands ramping up, and we've got firemen, policemen, teachers who can't even afford to live here. And there's no housing stock really for them to buy, even if they wanted to live here. So we know that we need to have more housing. And as you, I think, started off saying, we have a lot of elderly people who they really can't, they don't want to leave, but there's nothing else for them that's more affordable in town for them to, there's no options really for them because our over 55 housing stock is luxury, in Hanson standards luxury. $750,000, $800,000, which, if you're downsizing, may not be your go-to. You might not be thinking, oh, I'm going to be paying $800,000 for a condo. A plus with the HOA fees, et cetera, et cetera. So we've got a real dilemma because we have young people not able to buy in and old people not able to leave, which I know we're not unique, but
You're not
yeah.
special.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyone, don't even tell me the names, whatever stereotype you want to tell me about, I can tell you their cousin in another town.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
the same.
But what we really struggled with was really any kind of like, well, what's in it for us? Like, why is this good for us?
I think we can help with information to show how it's worked in other communities, not necessarily MBTA, but how housing has taken properties that were dead or dying, and they created new energized neighborhoods. And that if you like your quality of life and what makes your town special, you keep that by allowing new growth and investment, otherwise you die. And there are a lot of good examples around the South Shore. So I think we could be helpful to you in that if you wanted
What do
to
you
be
think
taking
about that,
another
Tom?
stab at housing.
Yeah.
And again, not technical assistance so much as being a voice that is willing to stand up and say, just look around, this is what's happening in other towns, and it's actually good.
Do you have any economic development committee? I'm just looking to, because I know you've got this guy's got a gun to his
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
I do too, I gotta get.
He's got Red Sox tickets.
Oh, do you have any economic development committees that you would suggest might be good for us to kind of like partner with or talk to or just pick their brains, like anybody that you've really seen?
Sure, I can get you some resources.
Yeah.
Let me think a little bit about how you're using natural resources and thinking about that. We can get lots of technical assistance around people who are looking at housing and get this through.
Okay, all right. Did you guys have any other, Kev, did you have
Yeah.
anything?
Oh, well, I was just gonna mention, one of the things that we were talking about in the planning board is, looking into like a starter home district.
Yeah.
That was one of the, you know, that could benefit us since we already have a lot of 55 plus. Although I do still see the problem with the 55 plus because we're almost pushing out the people that are on a fixed income in the town.
Yep.
Because they can't afford it. So it might be, who knows, it might be the richer people from another rich, I'm calling it a rich town, but
Yeah.
a more affluent town to downsize to come to a Hanson that's a little bit, you know, less money.
Which is happening.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like Laura was saying, we're kind of right in the middle. They kind of get squeezed. We get the older people in town saying we can't afford to be here. We don't want our taxes to go up. Then we have the younger people saying, well, you know, there's nothing for us to buy, even even if we can move here. So a starter home district would be great, or even our 40B housing stock is we're at 4.6%, I believe.
Yeah,
So we do have some 40Bs being built, but they're already counting towards that 4.6%. So
yeah, we're
really need-
pretty behind. And one of the
Yeah.
other things that had been discussed, I don't know if this would be an economic.
I would really be pushing then some acceptance on MBTA housing, otherwise you're gonna get 40Bs where you may not want them.
Yes,
And nothing wrong with 40Bs, but you want the housing in areas where it's gonna leverage or promote something else, not just where there was land a developer had and did the high density with a 40B. You've got a long way to go to get to Safe
we
Harbor.
lose our ability to influence really with the 40B. And, you know, you can influence plantings and things like that, but it's not, you know, materially. But if you're looking to shape the town and where things are located and you have a master plan, yeah, with the 40B, we lose that. We've already seen that.
I'm hoping to work with the zoning board and try and get them to adopt the limited initiative partnership program. So that way they can understand the friendly 40Bs, which, you know, you partner up with the.
Right, hold on. Can we just take a quick vote on
Sure.
Hanson Day?
Yep.
I will entertain a motion to set Hanson Day, actually, it's the 28th. On September 28th, with the rain date of whatever the following Saturday is, October something or other.
So
So Saturday the 28th, the rain date of Saturday the 5th of
Correct.
October.
Yep.
So
Okay,
Okay, I'll second. So
Okay.
I'm sorry, just to confirm, September 28th is the actual date, rain
Yeah.
date,
is
October
October.
5th.
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Okay. October 5th. Okay, so I second that motion.
Yeah, I hope those, well, anyway, if it's not right, we'll have to, okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Because Hanson Historical Society is having their big shindig. Thank you for coming. Good luck on your game. Nope, no apologies
Enjoy the
necessary.
Red Sox.
And that's the only thing we really needed to.
That's why I wanted to make sure you did that, because
Yeah.
I saw both there, so.
Okay. And you've got, what time do you have to be at your Red Sox game?
Well, kids are there. First pitch is 7:10. It's an hour and 5 minutes to get to the parking garage right now.
So
Good to see you, Peter.
what he's saying is he needs to go.
Yeah, okay, all
I
right.
will be glad, Tony and I have stayed in touch with many things, so we'll be glad to follow up and see where we can be of help.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Thank you
We
so
hope to
much.
see
It was
you
very
again.
nice to
Thank
meet you.
you. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for
Thank you.
coming.
Have fun. I won tickets to that game tonight and ended up giving them away because I had something else that I was doing. Hanson Business Network after this, so,
You gotta have fun sometimes.
anyway, okay, what else?
So the rest of the agenda, Madam Chair, is the Economic Development Committee draft outline. That's in your packet. I'd take it with you and just kind of read through it.
Okay,
I had Kim take a look at, the committee had talked about a farmer's market, so I had her do some research on what would it take to, say, create a farmer's market in Hanson.
yeah.
And so she's done the research, she did a great job, so there's
Well,
informational.
thanks so much, Kim.
There's an-
Appreciate that.
There's informational packet there on what it would take to sort of,
Is it a heavy lift or?
It's something you need to prepare for. Can't just jump into it. You gotta
Okay.
think about it a year in advance.
Okay. So if we were maybe thinking of next spring, then now would be the
Now
time
is
to
the
start
time.
having conversations? Okay.
And if I could ask a question about that, would food trucks fall under farmer's market setup, would you say? Or like a food truck rodeo kind of event?
I think
Or would that just be?
Some-
that would
Farmers
be easier,
markets
that
have
would
them.
be
Might be
easier to
easier,
have than a farmer's market. The farmer's market, it's, you're gonna want someone that's gonna be in charge of the organization of it, how it all runs, who's gonna be at it, who's paying, are you charging for people to be there? That person needs to get paid. So there's like more aspects to it than just inviting a bunch of farmers to sell their stuff, you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, I mean, I went to the Pembroke and Halifax farmers markets last Saturday, and Halifax, no offense to anybody in Halifax, was very loosely organized. And actually, I think there was only one guy selling actual farm, like vegetables and flowers. The Pembroke one was a little bit more upscale. There was a lot of crafts at the Halifax one. The Pembroke one was a little more upscale. They had the pretentious pickle, which I love, and a few other. Don't worry, it's just us. We are being recorded, but there's not a video, so don't worry about it. They had pretentious pickle and quite a few, one woman selling meat that she had raised, and I assume their Board of Health was very involved.
oh, that was another important.
And making sure that everybody had the permits, like if they're making things in their home kitchens and all that. That was interesting, and I know Hanover has done them.
Plymouth has a really good one at, the old, Ocean State Job Lot, Plaza, which is next to Market
Doesn't
Basket.
Rye Tavern have one too? Because I've sort of aspirationally always wanted to go to that.
Tavern, the one
Yes.
down at the Pine Hill.
Yes, they have
I've
one.
heard, I've never been.
Like it's a weird, like maybe like a Thursday. It's like not like a Saturday or
Right,
Sunday. It's
yeah.
like, I'm always like, oh, I would really love to go there. And then I'm like, well, they're really getting down to Plymouth by like 2 p.m. on a random Thursday.
Right,
Just
way
not
down
gonna
there too.
Yeah.
The one you mentioned, was that at Kingston?
No, that one is, the, Plymouth, so it's right next to Market
Okay.
Basket, Marshall's, home, like on the other
I think
Oh, yeah.
side. G
I've
Pub.
been to the
G
Kingston
Pub.
one though too.
Yeah, Kingston
Yeah,
at the
okay.
mall.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, they have that one
Went to one in
also.
Rockland.
So it does seem like somebody needs to kind of, would need to take the lead on it. And I'm saying these words out loud, and in the back of my mind, I'm saying, Laura, don't do it, because you can't, you have too much going on. But this is just the type of thing I'd love to do, but I think, I'll have to ask Mary Ann DiMarcio from Green Hanson, but I rustily recall, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years ago, that there was a farmer's market at the Thomas Mill. And it was, I think, primarily on Saturdays. It was early in the morning, and I was like shipping my kids all over the place, so I never really I made it like a couple of times, but I think it became burdensome to be in charge of it. People were like canceling out at the last minute, then they didn't have enough people there, and then people were like, why am I even going? Because,
Right.
so it just became like this. So at some point, they just were like, Uncle, we're done, we're not gonna.
Well, that's it too,
Yeah.
is it discusses a lot about, having a contract or a commitment through the season and things along that line, like setting it up as a business for you to be safe at the end, so that that exact situation doesn't happen.
I wish there was like a nonprofit who, because it would be great, right, if they were gonna charge like, say, I don't know, $25 a table or something like that. But that a nonprofit would benefit, but like would also be benefiting all these little farm. We have a ton of little farm stands in Hanson, like we've got an abundance of wealth. So, I mean, all right, so we'll have to look, we'll have to put a pin in that and look at that more. Were you here for a particular item? Oh, you just, okay, all right. I wasn't sure if you were here for the farmer's market, you wanted to chime in, or,
May I just say something else?
great, okay, yeah.
The other
You
thing-
just missed, we just had the gentleman from the South Shore Chamber of Commerce.
That's what I was trying to go
Yeah,
for.
you just missed him, but, we did record our, meeting with him, and one of the things that he really said is, we've got to think about housing to attract younger families. If you're looking for economic development, you need to be attracting growth, which is new people moving to town, not necessarily like busting at the seams building, but, and one of the things we talked to him about, that we're sort of focused on is like what makes Hanson different. And one of the things we've discussed is we think ecotourism is particularly interesting for Hanson because we've got Burridge. I don't know if have you been to Burridge? Yeah. So, that we think that is pretty unique. Plus, we've got all kinds of other little trails and potentially whatever's going to happen up at Plymouth County Hospital, the former Plymouth County Hospital. He was helpful. He's going to get back to us and give us some information. He's going to try to connect us with other economic development committees so we can kind of find out what they're doing. And
you can hear the whole interview.
You can hear the whole-
We posted on
yeah.
Whitman Hanson Cable Access.
Start earlier than 5?
it did start. It started at 5.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
I
don't.
think I must have misread the website.
No.
Oh, we posted an amended agenda
Oh, I didn't look
to call.
for it since last week, probably.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
well, our apologies. So one of the gentlemen on our Economic Development Committee coaches baseball, and he had a conflict, so it was either cancel or try to bump it a little bit early, so we bumped it a little bit early.
But again, the meeting is recorded and we put it on the Whitman Hanson Cable
I watched some of
Access.
the previous recordings before.
Oh, my gosh, you must be our one of 3 people that's listening to them. It's good
So,
to know somebody
Does
cares.
that mean that you might have time to volunteer and want to join the Economic Development Committee?
Just gonna bring that up.
Yeah, I do not even know your name, but I do know that every time I've seen you get up at town meeting, I think that you're smart. I think that you are well-spoken, and I can tell that you've got a heart for service. And we would love to have you in whatever capacity you would like as a volunteer in town. So just noodle that. And I know I'm not alone because I've talked to Anne Rain about it, and I was like, I really like what she's got to say. And you seem very thoughtful, and I remember when I was sort of new and I would just attend meetings and I had no idea what was going on, and I would just take notes and and then eventually I started piecing stuff together. I'm not suggesting that to you. You may be like light years ahead of where I was, but
Oh, no, that's probably. I try to go to town meeting as much as I can, and I try and watch, some of this sort of stuff, and it's hard, I think so many families are so busy,
yes.
And it's really hard to get, I mean, I see how many committees have open positions
Yep.
right now. And then the people who are doing it, don't get the most positive support.
No, that would be the understatement. And you get burnout because it's a lot of the same people who are on multiple committees. And we need fresh, you know what I mean? We need like fresh perspectives. We need people to come in and say, well, have you guys ever thought about this? And it could be something that's completely obvious to everybody else, but you know how when you're in the throes of something, you're not always like seeing, like, wow, that was obvious, thanks for pointing that out. So think about it, because we do have 2 openings on our Economic Development Committee, and we get to work with the lovely and talented Mr. Jafreas, and he's always looking for grants for us and working on all kinds of stuff, sidewalks, a boardwalk from Main Street to Burridge, so
I
that,
was curious about the video you two created together.
oh, that was a train wreck, I know.
We're amateurs on that.
We're totally amateurs,
But
yeah.
we tried.
Yeah,
So,
But it was,
yeah.
it was a budget production, of course, the budget of Hanson.
yeah.
But you guys did it, and I didn't ever know that it existed until I went kind of like looking around for more information about this council. I'd love to know where it was initially shared and like, what effort was made to kind of rally, anyone around.
Did we?
getting
I think-
Did we put that on our website?
I think I had posted it on the Economic Development Committee's webpage. I posted a link to it.
And that was where I found it. I
That's where you
think
found
it was
it?
like,
Yeah.
like, do realtors know about this? Did we try and push it through like any of the town pages and
I don't know,
ask
did
businesses
you
to
work
share it?
with,
Like,
I think I did my best to try and push it through all the outlets that we have on hand.
well, you could,
But I could
yeah.
do it again.
Ask Emily if she can pimp it out a little bit.
Sure.
She probably could get it out there. And then, and yes, we have had,
But I just remember
yeah.
seeing it and thinking, it was a brief and educational piece, and it would be great if there was a way to get that content in front of, commercial real estate agents who are maybe trying to help potential business owners or business owners who are looking to relocate.
it's a great idea.
Get some of that
Yeah.
information, and maybe it might spur their interest to the packet that you created. I mean, some of those financial figures about, Hanson's income, I was really shocked by.
Were you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we threw around a lot of wealth, the word wealth a lot in not so distant history with respect to the schools, but looking at Hanson as having money that people would like to spend in town. My family lives closer to the Halifax line, and it's like, oh, did we go to Shaw's or did we go to Stop and Shop?
Yeah.
But, there are potentially so many more of those decisions that could be happening on a smaller scale.
Definitely.
And I'm sure we're not the only people who'd like to keep our money in town when we can.
Yeah, we just completed the master plan. So that's going to be up, and you'll see the figures there that talk about the, as they use the term, is leakage,
Yes.
where all
Yeah.
the amount of money that goes from the residents to abutting towns because the amenities are not here in town. I think you'll find that a pretty interesting number, because it is,
You assessed the leakage?
yeah, they
were able to
yeah, they were
kind
able
of,
to
yeah.
figure out, and it was a pretty large number.
It was a
Is it
large
for
number.
different categories, like groceries versus clothing versus
I'd have to look,
entertainment?
I think they did look at all those categories, and I wanna say maybe it's like the sum total of all of that,
That's fascinating.
that it was, I feel like it was like around like
Weren't we
$80 million
having to
or
do a
something like
refresh
that.
on that anyway?
What's that?
Aren't we having a refresh on, that might not have been in some of the data we were gonna have, I can't think of, FX, yeah.
Yeah, and, I know that we probably wanna circle back, I mean, he didn't seem to have an interest, and when we sort of asked him to sharpen his pencil.
Yeah,
So I'm thinking that maybe some of the information that we have from the master plan might assist in, and maybe look at a grant.
yeah, so that information came from a study that we funded in 2019, serendipitously. And of course, a lot of the demographics have changed in terms of commuting and da-da-da-da, but and maybe leakage, I don't know, because that, maybe people's habits have changed since 2019. So we circled back with the consultant that had worked on the original plan to say, we need a little bit of a refresh here, 5 years later. And he came back with an astronomically large, basically he was charging us the same fee, essentially the same fee that we paid for the initial one. We were like, come on, you're just freshening up some of the data. Like why, like you've got the guts of it. You're just plugging in new numbers. Why would, and we just never heard back from him.
Yeah, after we asked him to shop his
Yeah.
pencil, he did.
Well, yeah, if you could circle back with him, but, one of the other things that, so I, do the Hanson Business Network, which is not government, it's private, but there's a lot of crossover here. And one of the things we're working on is putting together which will be responsive to your, if I have to pick a local business or not. One of the things we're working on is a directory of local businesses, and we're going to put a QR code at the library, the post office, town hall. Basically, you click the QR code, and we'll have it obviously on the website, on our website and on Facebook too. If you're like, oh, I need somebody to pump my septic system, like, is there anybody, that's in Hanson? Because I do that all the time. Like, I'll say, I need a plumber, to the extent possible. I mean, I don't get crazy about it, but, I'd really like to keep it in Hanson. Or if I need a floral arrangement, or if I need dry clean, like I try to keep it in Hanson. And I know a lot of people do. But if you don't have that information, you're just like, there's somebody right over the border in Pembroke, I'll just do it. So we're gonna have that directory and pop up the QR code. People can build anything that you want, it will be sorted by category. Hair salons, dance studios, whatever it is. And no cost, we're not like a crazy, it's very casual. It's just a bunch of business owners who get together, try to support each other, answer questions, train each other on stuff we know, figure out how do we support the community, like we do some fundraising. We help with Hanson Day, which the Economic Development Committee does. So anyway,
May I ask a question? So as a resident, would you support the increase of the business zones? Not to a large extent, but let's just say a business zone being expanded to allow for further business development.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would.
And I'm not talking about like Walgreens, big
No,
businesses,
I
but
understand
yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I think it's a really interesting idea, and I guess what I would probably first want to know as a resident is what is the status of our current business zone? Are all of the buildings full? Like, do we just not have like enough of a business zone to begin with? Is there, abandoned, decrepit property that should be like looked into further? Can people be nudged? I used to live before the housing crisis and everything started going up and up. There was a lot of abandoned homes in my neighborhood that have since been bought and flipped and are now beautiful. And it's interesting to wonder what other, buildings like that exist in town. And I just,
yeah, the issue we have is businesses wanting to come in and not having a place, or they're going for special permits to create businesses within a resident zone.
yeah.
And
Is
that,
it
and
like
that,
mixed use businesses, or is it?
well, for some reason, Hanson is very attractive to landscapers
Yes.
and used car dealers.
Yes, it's very, very
And-
random.
Which is, unfortunate. They're businesses. We can use the business, but it'd be nice to see a larger variety of businesses with much more different amenities.
Yeah,
So we do get a lot of folks that will want to have, let's say they're a landscaper and they want to run the business out of their home, and so they have to go for a special permit, or because it's a home business, and so it'd be nice to have a greater business district to allow spaces that they could find to go into that are just sort of by right versus
yeah.
Yeah.
special permit. They would have to file for site plan approval, but
Yeah.
I think it would be really about like how it's communicated and what the rules are gonna be. I would love, like, I can walk to a small convenience store. That's amazing. I wish everyone in town could walk to a small convenience store, or a coffee shop or something cool, just to make the town more walkable.
Yeah,
But I wouldn't want to have somebody put up a Walgreens next to my house.
Right,
So I think as long as there was a really clear explanation of, what this would be and what the appetite is and what protections are in place to make sure that, your neighborhood house doesn't become a Walgreens, then I would absolutely get on board with it. I would love to be able to walk to something.
well, Tony's got all kinds of little fantasies about Main Street, what we could have. He wants to have like a little brewing kind of thing and some,
Brewery.
like some sidewalks where people can walk, some restaurants, like a little, kind of like Easton, a little bit like Easton, like that little. Oh, well, it's quite lovely. They've really done it used to be a little decrepit, similar to what we've got in some of our areas of Main Street.
I was last week, I'd taken Thursday and Friday, and my wife has Fridays off, summer schedule. And because it was so hot, I got up at about 5:30 in the morning and did some weeding out in the yard, and by the time I was done, it was about 8:15, and she came outside with a bottle of water, and I said, "Want to go to breakfast?" And she, "Yeah." I said, "Let's go to the Farmer's Daughter,"
There you go.
which is in East.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there, I compare Hanson a lot with what Easton was.
Yes.
There was that, we like our town the way it is, we really don't want to change. And then there was a large project of affordable housing, and that caused a lot of anxiety in the town. But the project was well done. It's really nice in the center of town, and it spurred businesses to move to that section where the Farmer's Daughter was like the linchpin.
Yep.
It's a eatery, and now there's an Italian restaurant, and then they improved the streetscape by adding sidewalks and trees, and so my wife and I went to the Farmer's Daughter, and we were sitting on the sidewalk having
Yep.
breakfast, and
Yeah.
it was a nice day, and I can envision that for like Main Street. I'd like to see that, and then have that connectivity with sidewalks from like one end to the other, and
I even like the aesthetic, like the brick, and it's like very
Yeah.
low key. It's not like it's very, I don't know, just kind of like small town.
and
You
so
want
we're,
something new that feels like it's old.
Yeah, yeah.
we're hoping to have something. We have a grant for sidewalks right now that are designs being worked on from Elm Street to High Street, and I've applied for another sidewalk grant to revise plans that were done in 2002, which would create sidewalks from High Street all the way up to Montponset Street. So,
In our, I know this is a loaded question, but
Go for it.
are those grants in jeopardy?
Yes.
So on one of the excuse me, on one of the items that I have there is the
Yeah.
one-stop grant. So I applied for 8 grants this year under the one-stop program
Yep.
for just under $2.4 million. And
And what
our
does-
non-compliance, if on January 2nd, 2025, we're not in compliance with the MBTA, those would probably be immediately eliminated. Now,
all of those.
yeah, all of those would be eliminated. Now, we don't find out about these grants until the end of 2024. Is it because at this point they know we're sort of on the anti-side? Will it affect us potentially getting any of these? I don't know. You just don't know. It could be, it could be one of those inter-office wink-wink memos that says, well, they're not really interested in NBTA, so let's not give them any grants. I don't know. It's, pure speculation. But, so yeah, there's, out of those 8 on January 2nd would more than likely, if they continue as they've been with these other communities, they would be in
Yep.
jeopardy. So.
Yeah, I will say, I'm sorry, my husband, who usually never calls me, has called me twice, so I'm like now having a panic attack. But anyway, unfortunately, most of the grants that we've been working on for the the boardwalk, the sidewalks, you know, everything is tied to the MBTA community. So it was quite a sucker punch to all three of us when, even though we may have personally not been like team MBTA community, we know the downstream impact of the town not being compliant is gonna really kill us for grants, so.
Yeah, I have a silly question that, it's probably more of a planning board question, but you all seem very
Go for it.
invested in this. Reading through the guidelines around the MBTA, it seemed like, you know, it doesn't have to be the train station. You can also incorporate things like ferry stations and bus stops and, you know, whatever you have.
Yeah.
So if the concern is that we don't have, like, that we would be zoning too much too close to the train, like, is there a workaround solution where we could, like, I'm just going completely off the cuff here.
No, go for it, yeah.
This may be very silly. But, like, could we work with, like Brockton Area Transport to create, like, a bus route that could then accept lots of small zoning of affordable housing spread out along the bus route versus all concentrated around this one train station?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
So,
I think
yeah.
it's a case of this, the Commonwealth is designated because we have a commuter rail, that we're a commuter rail state, we're a commuter rail town.
Yeah.
And so they set this number of 750. That's the floor. What they do is they say, oh, say you're a commuter rail town, 15% of your housing stock. Well, 15% of a housing stock would be below the 750. So what they do is say, okay, so then it's 750, which is a density of 15 units per acre times a 50-acre zone. And that's where you come up with 750. But all the town has to do is create the zone. We don't have to we don't have to create any infrastructure, we don't have to build any housing. All we have to do is create the zone within the half a mile. And we're allowed to create bylaws for that zone. So a person can put in a multifamily unit by right, but they would still come to the planning board for site plan review. They would still have to meet the Wetlands Act.
Right.
They would still have to meet Title V for septics. So they can't work around the regulations, say like a 40B gives you a lot more leeway for affordable housing.
So I think when people look at it from the town's aspect, they think 750, we don't want to be that town that has
Yeah.
another 750 units here, and they
Right.
think it's going to happen tomorrow.
And it's
Not going to happen tomorrow, and it might
and
not
it's not-
happen at all.
It
And
might not
and
ever
that's
happen.
just it. The
Yeah.
state is saying, we know that we have these numbers, and we know that we have these numbers, and we know that not every town is, that this will work in, or they know that there's gonna be towns, you're never gonna get close to that number. They understand that. You might build 10, another town might build 50. And you might have a town that builds the 750. But they know that, so it's just, look, we just want you to create the zone. I think it's more like they want the appearance that we're trying to do something to address the housing shortage.
But the bottom line is it all depends on whether a private developer is
Comes
willing
in.
to invest the money
Exactly.
and build in the
Exactly.
zone that you've designated
Exactly.
for that housing.
Exactly. You know, if you accept the MBTA's zoning district and the bylaw, it still means that someone from the private sector has to come in and actually propose a project. And you may have developers that go, no, Hanson, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a town for me to build in.
But the issue of, like, being able to zone that within the area that the state would like us to, without putting, like, an unmanageable strain on our existing infrastructure. I understand some strain is unavoidable if some of this was developed, but we could zone it. Like, we do have the acreage.
Yes, yeah, we have the acreage, and the whole half mile idea is for the walkability, so that you can have folks being able to get to the commuter rail and walk home, and you can put in it's allowed for a mixed use component, so you can have retail on the ground floor and residential above.
Like, it's happening.
Yeah,
It's happening on
yeah.
Main Street now, so it's just we have to create the zone, and the downside is, like the chair has said, is that we lose that grant money, and Hanson desperately needs the grant money for our projects.
And I think that project 999 Main Street that's being built now is a great example of what it could be.
Yes,
The whole
yes.
the whole way down.
Yep.
But that didn't that, we're not an MBTA community, or approved MBTA community, I guess you call it. So that isn't counting towards
Right.
affordable housing or anything like that.
Yeah, that
That
project was
a
done,
flex overlay.
that was done under our flexible overlay district, which is allowed by a special permit. So that project isn't allowed under special permit for that zone. It doesn't have any affordable, units in it. But I can tell you that both buildings are, completely rented out as far as the apartments.
I'm excited. I cannot wait to go to Restoration Coffee, and I don't even know what other, I know Aura Lash is going in
Aura
there.
Lash, yeah.
I'm excited about it, and I do hope that it's kind of like a spark that kind of, you know, like, then other businesses are like, oh, you know what, there's Aura Lash, Restoration Coffee, like, I've got a simpatico business, like a thrift store or something, you know what I mean? Like, I am hoping that's gonna spur, but of course, we've still got that Ocean Spray building that.
And the MBTA part, under the bylaw, within the MBTA zoning, we're limiting it to 3 stories. We're holding fast with our current height requirements, which is 40 feet
Yep.
for buildings.
Yeah.
So there's no increase of.
No high rise.
No high rises.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and the zone that it's in, there's the 2 large tracts of land that if they were to be used, again, you could hide this, let's say you created a village type situation. You could hide it in the woods. You'd buffer it from the rest of the area.
Do some landscaping.
Yeah,
It's
or
not gonna
even
be
just the
like
natural.
Route 18 and Wayne,
Right, it's
where
just,
everything's just busted
exactly,
out
it's
at the
just, it's
seams
just the
there.
natural
Yeah.
state that's there, that you could, buffer anything that was to go in there. But again, it's still the private sector that has
I
to.
think, yeah, you know, I know you guys have been planning or looking at that again. And I'm hoping that we can try to educate people about what it is. I don't know if that's gonna change the outcome or not. You know, there's a meeting tonight, actually, in Pembroke, with folks about how to fight the MBTA community, how to fight the state, the overreach with the state, so,
And I understand that. I mean, I do. I understand that. As a resident of a town in the Massachusetts, I've never been a fan of being mandated, but there's also been plenty of other mandates that we all live with. I mean, I always go like, when you go out to your car, do you put your child in a car seat?
yeah.
That was a mandate. When you get in your car, do you put on your seatbelt? That was a mandate. Do you enjoy the fact that when you go to a restaurant, there isn't smoke in your face? That was a mandate.
True.
They were all things that they were mandated, and it did have people like, well, I don't want the government telling me what to do, but in the end, we do it, and most people nowadays don't really think about it. But I get,
Yeah,
I
I
get
think this just feels like,
it. But,
okay, you're
Yeah.
on our home, you're
Yeah.
infringing on our home turf.
Absolutely.
You're gonna tell us what to do with our home turf. We moved here because we had a certain look and feel of a
Yeah.
town that we liked and felt comfortable with, and now you're forcing this,
Yeah.
it feels.
I can I can totally understand that. I get it. I
Yeah.
just look at it as like, I hate to see the town get hurt by losing all the grants, because we know that in the last 2 years we've received just under $500,000 in grant money. I mean, just the master plan, that $60,000 was grant money from the One Stop, and then we received $30,000 from the DLTA grant, and then the rest was the town put in.
What kills me is most of the progress that we've been able to make in the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 years, because we're on such we have such austerity measures, just generally, even before this whole school thing, the most recent school vote, we've done with grant money. I mean, almost everything, we've bought vehicles for the fire department with grant money. We've bought conservation land with grant money. The list just goes on and on and on.
Right. And the grants are getting more competitive.
Yeah,
The One Stop program itself, I forget what they said, that what the increase was, that there's just a lot more interest now and it's getting a lot more competitive. So,
well, all right, I guess that was a mini therapy session on that, but, but speaking of grants, so, the one-stop grants, we're gonna keep running fast and furious until the end of the year and do whatever we can.
right, I've submitted, and now they're in the process of review, and we'll find out at the end of the year one way or another. So,
And I've told Lisa, whatever grants we've already been awarded, we
We're
need
going-
to
we're-
spend like there's no
we're
tomorrow.
going full
because we
speed
may-
on those projects to
Yeah,
keep them going.
okay.
Um,
Just because we don't, we don't really know what awaits us on the other side of, next year.
The budget for the EDC,
Yeah.
for 2025, we have a $1,500 budget.
Well, that's quite lovely.
Is that that's in addition to our balance? Is that what you're saying?
No.
No?
I received the budget appropriation list, and it says here for 2025 that economic development receives $1,500. I did inquire downstairs, but the town accountant wasn't in. I'm gonna just double check, but I would think that probably what the balance was turned into maybe the free cash.
I see.
You know.
Okay.
I mean, it's usually use it or lose it,
Yeah,
but that's
okay,
okay if we get
That's okay,
replenished,
yeah.
because we are gonna
Well,
be
we got
doing some
replenished.
outreach to businesses.
Right.
And, which is one of the things we need to talk about, that when Chris is here at the next meeting is, I know we were gonna hit the pavement and go around and talk to businesses and interview businesses about what it is they needed from us, what we could do for them. But I don't wanna do that without Chris here,
Sure,
because,
yeah.
we need him to be on board too.
Again, the master plan has been completed, so we can tick that box, which is great.
Yeah.
I was
And,
gonna ask if you had read it, but clearly you have, because you're on the planning board.
Yeah,
and he was on the steering committee.
yeah, I was on the
Yeah.
steering committee too.
So we were fortunate to.
It was a lot of
we've been
reading,
fortunate
but
to
luckily
get
it was given to us in chapters, so you're.
I do think, that, I know Rhiannon said she was going to put together like a executive summary of, okay, here's all the background on the master plan, but here's the action steps, like the guideposts.
Yes,
Um,
she did.
So I'm wondering, is there something in that we should be plucking out as the Economic Development Committee to kind of help guide us?
She did send me an Excel spreadsheet, and I'll take a look through it,
Okay.
to see.
And even
I
if she
skimmed
could
it
spell
quickly.
it out,
but-
like Economic Development Committee, if there are things that you think are more like in our swim lane and not necessarily like planning or whatever, like, I think we should parse through it that way. I'd also be curious, honestly, if there are things that the select board should be working on. I'd like to see that list too, because, we get so caught up in reacting and in the basic things like town meeting and that type of stuff, that I really want to keep working on moving us towards planning. Yes, we're gonna have to react, that's a day-to-day reality, and, there's some things we just can't plan for or imagine would happen that we have to react to. I don't want to get distracted from trying to make steady progress on the goals that have been identified,
Yeah, that's,
so.
she had recommended, as I mentioned last night, was, every quarter, pull it out. And I'll probably do that with the planning board and say, okay, let's take a goal and see, let's really push it and try and chase, obviously there's always the low hanging fruit, try and
Yeah,
get that, and
yeah.
then push some of the other ones to
But
get.
that's why I'm saying
achieve
if
those
we can
goals.
kind of compartmentalize, like, okay, these sort of seem like they're land use things.
And that's another,
know,
that's what,
yeah.
one of her recommendations in the master plan is that, and the planning board has talked about this, is to try and, even if you did, a quarterly land use
Some.
forum, summit, whatever you
yes.
wanna call it, and get
Yeah.
everyone together to try and, where are you at, what are you finding, how can we work together and get achieve some common goals.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I always love it when we break down those barriers and people just talk to each other instead of like, this is not my job, I am just doing this one thing. And I'm not just saying employees, we can do it as committee members too, where we just don't think to pop our heads up and say, is anybody else experiencing this? Or does anybody have any, any kind of background on this? And it's been working fantastically with the inspectional task force, where the building inspector and the health agent and the fire department have all been meeting about buildings of concern and working together and saying, how can we support these businesses and or people? And to the extent that people are saying, we don't want your support, we have no intention of complying, how do we reinforce that compliance? Well, as the board would say, resistance is futile. That you have to comply with these regulations. So I have seen, for the first time in years, us really move the needle on getting folks to comply with some pretty serious inspectional service issues that are really dangerous to the health and safety of citizens and to our first responders who might show up at a building that doesn't have sprinkler heads, for example, or something like that. So I think the more of that we could do, and in my dream scenario, in my little dreamland, I would love it if somebody comes to us for business or building a house, and it's one-stop shopping. They don't have to have death by 1,000 cuts and try to figure out who to go to in what sequence, and you gotta check with nope, that's not my job, it's this one, we have gotten feedback, Kevin and I have gotten feedback from businesses about, Joe Campbell hates when I say this, but the sign bylaws and stuff like that, that people are like, your bylaws are extremely difficult on the signage. And Joe's like, we've simplified them. I'm like, well, that's great, but people still have the perception, the feeling that they are difficult. And again, in my dream scenario, we'd have somebody come to us and say, I would like to open a business in Hanson. What do I need to do? And we could say, oh, well, where were you thinking of opening that? What type of business? And then we would say, you need to meet with CBA, that's near wetlands, we could get this all set up for you. Of course, this is difficult to do with the cut-in staff, but I'm just saying, my dream, my nirvana. And my husband has talked about this for ages because Braintree had something similar, where literally they would all sit around the table and just talk about, let's say, I don't know, Shaw's was locating to us or something.
Right.
Okay, what do we need from Shaw's? Okay, health agent, what do you need? Okay, where are you at on that? Planner, what do you need? Okay, have you guys met ZBA? Have you got, and you just pass it through. So it's a customer service experience for somebody, and they don't want to rip their hair out and go screaming out of the room because it's very bureaucratic. And I know for people that are dealing with it every day, it doesn't seem complicated, but if you're not dealing with it every day, it can be super frustrating. And I'm sure you run into this with well, you're not in Hanson, but in the town you're in, with your business, the permitting and stuff, and so I love the idea of the summit. I would love people to be talking about what they're learning, what they're seeing, can I help you with that particular issue? I would really like to see that.
There is I think it's 43D program, which is sort of like a accelerated permitting process.
Yes.
And I had looked into it when I sort of arrived here and stuff. I read through it, looked into it, and I said, okay, food for thought, and we'll see get a lay of the land and kind of feel things out and see how it might, because if you throw in change, sometimes people can resist.
Yeah, but now that we're moving towards the online permitting, I think that opens up avenues for more connectivity between the departments to be able to all look at the same system and say, oh, well, I can see they've already gone to conservation, they've already done it, instead of this, walking a piece of paper around and
Well,
trying,
the permit system that they have now, Permitize.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
that
it is.
every department can look at it.
Yeah.
The permits. I've had some issues with getting on. My password for some reason didn't work. We reset the password, still didn't work. So we've had some technical issues, at least on my end. But the departments can all look and see who's done what. I will say that on second floor, there is, I think, pretty good communication between departments of, hey, this project, do you know what's going on? And good communication between all the departments on a daily, to know what's going on with the different projects that might be going and properties that might have issues.
But I think I'm thinking in particular, there was a person who owns a business in town, and they had not applied on a timely basis to renew their business license, but they were trying to renew it recently. And of course, the process is, it has to go to the treasurer collector. Do they owe any taxes? Then you have to go to the chief of police. Are there any issues? And it was just, I just was like, this is very laborious for like an average Joe to have to figure out, all the different steps.
Yeah.
And I know we're not a town that we could do like white glove treatment and have somebody walk it through, but there must be a way we could virtually do that, or at least break down some of the barriers. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, because I have seen that in other communities.
Yeah,
That's what sort of happens. It's sort of I'll use the term liaison, and
Yeah.
it gets walked around to everyone so they can sign off on it. And a lot of
Yeah.
communities are going to that type of system, if you will. And some of it you can do online, and some of it's just it's in-house.
I think the benefits are twofold. First of all, you don't have frustrated, people being frustrated with their experience. The second thing is, the easier you make it for people to comply, the more likely they are to comply with the regulations you've got. So it's a win-win. That's the way I look at it, but,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of other towns, everything is submitted online. And I mean everything. From planning boards to zoning boards to building departments
Yep.
to conservation. I can tell you, there's several communities that use the Permitize program, and a lot of them, it's don't even come in to the office
Yeah.
and give us paper. Just go online. You submit everything online. Fill out your application online, you can pay online, you submit all your plans online, everything's a PDF, And then there's some communities that do everything online, but then we also want copies. And I just go, why?
Or it could be Halifax. We
Yeah.
literally are still giving pieces of paper.
And
Yeah.
you go, why
Yeah.
am I having to give you copies when, one, everything's being done online, and two, why can't you just print out your own copies? But anyway, that's
It's like a bad Saturday
Yeah,
Night
that's a
Live
different.
skit. Okay, so,
The last thing we have is ecotourism.
Yeah.
I asked Kim to do some research, and so in your packet, take it and read about it. I asked her to look at, we had kicked this around, and what's the biggest thing that we have in Hanson is trails, open space, the burbage. So I asked her to, take a look at the ecotourism industry in, let's say, Massachusetts or other communities in Massachusetts, and what is it? How could maybe we could apply it here? Maybe we could get in touch with some towns that it's a big business, or it's a business that has boomed and created other businesses. Like, if you have people come into your town to walk the trails, and they want to have some place to go have something to eat, or bicycle rentals or kayaks. So, you have all the ponds. So Kim did a great job of putting that together. So I'd like the committee to read through it and give us feedback as to what you think, and because maybe that's maybe Hanson's not the town that might have large industry. But maybe you have an industry that is ecotourism related.
I definitely could see that. I mean, I am at Burge at least 5 days a week, on different, not always the one by light control. Sometimes I do the Elm Street entrances, but there are people from all over the state coming.
Yeah, and if we could promote that, maybe we can get some. I mean, we obviously don't want to cause saturation, but maybe you can get some businesses that do this already in other parts of the state, and go, oh yeah, geez, that's great. Yeah, they have the Bay Circuit Trail, they have the Burbage, they have a lot of ponds. Maybe there's a potential there for creating some kind of business that's related to
Well,
it.
like Wampatuck State Park, I grew up in Situate, right near Wampatuck State Park. They rent bikes. There's a dude who
Right.
rents bikes.
It
Like
could be a weekend thing.
Yeah. And there was somebody who was renting kayaks at Camp Kawani. I'm not sure if that ended up Did you guys ever rent them
I
from
never
him?
rented them.
I don't
but
know
I
if
knew
that ended up being, I think his hours were like kind of erratic, and I don't know how much they were advertising it, but there definitely was some take-up, and I think he also gave like lessons. And I think if you were doing something like barge, holy moly, people would be really into like kayaking barge. That would be amazing.
I mean, in Canton, up 138 in Canton, there's a zip line place. You can go. I didn't even realize it existed until a couple of years
Yeah.
ago. It was during COVID. My wife had mentioned it. She goes, "Hey, you know this is like a zip line place up in Canton, and it's right off 138." I don't know.
Treetop Adventure.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes,
So,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so they, I mean, what's, you know, is there something that a business like that might be interested in looking at? Is there a property in town or a town-owned property or something? I think that's probably like, okay, what do we have that we can offer? That's it. That's
We
probably
got
the
the
biggest.
skydiving at Cranland Airport.
Yeah, that's the
Yep.
big, I think that's the biggest thing we have is the open space that you could try
It is.
and develop some kind of
I
autonomy
really
from.
would love to pursue the concept of that education center with the Mass Wildlife and Fisheries. They had broached the subject with us, they had said, hey, one of the buildings, you know, the light control buildings, maybe we would want to rent that, we could do an education center. I think that that could be a huge boon for them, but also for us, because if they have an education center, you're gonna attract all kinds of little people and families, which I love the idea of turning little people on to nature, because once they're hooked, they're gonna be little nature fanatics for the rest of their lives, which is awesome. So and then what businesses, you know, might drive off of that? Kayaking, you know, the kayak rental, the bike rental,
Right.
Guided hikes, you know.
And then you have the trail system, the Bay Circuit Trail, it's gonna go through where the High Street Park is.
Yeah.
So I think there's.
How
I
do
think-
we get that popping? How do we get that conversation started?
Well, like I said, Kim did the research of that, and so if it's something that the committee would like to look at, we can start I can have her do some more research, and we can start trying to reach out to some communities where this has been done, or companies that do it, and ask them, okay, hey, what as a company do you need to say, to get started, you know? We just try and reach out to people and put it out there that, hey, what's the one thing Hanson has? We have a lot of open space and we have a lot of trails, you know?
We have the ski shop which sells bikes too.
Yeah.
That's like over near the Hanover line.
Yeah.
I don't know if he rents bikes, I know he fixes them and sells new bikes, but like, and then there's, Dick Mall's bike shop in Halifax, like, there's a place, in Whitman, so there's a couple of places that, you know.
And that's the other thing, is if we were to sort of expand our business zone, and I'm not saying go crazy with expansion of like, okay, let's create a business zone from one side here or all the way across town. But if we expanded some of the business zones, where we could do as of right stuff, a business doesn't necessarily have to go through that step of, oh, I need to go get a special permit. Okay, you need to do a site plan, but maybe not, you know, it might bring their costs down. And if we can get them closer to the areas that they're going to serve, let's say around the Burridge or around Main Street,
Yeah.
you know.
And one of the things we had explored was actually are businesses located in non-business zones that you don't even think of. Like one that just comes to mind is one
ski shop.
near me. Is the
Yeah.
ski shop.
Yeah,
Damien's, you know, things like that,
Damien's,
where
yeah,
you're like, oh, I thought that was already a business zone.
Yeah.
And it's really not. So.
so is that
to-
something planning would, like, would you
Well-
guys initiate it on behalf of the Economic Development?
Well, I think the
Committee,
Economic
or-
Development Committee would probably be the place to start. And like I said, you know, Kim did a great job with that. We can continue sort of going down that path. And I can have her continue to go down that path and start reaching out and try and, you know, garner as much information as we can and see, okay, how can we package this? And then maybe with the help of like South Shore Chamber of Commerce and or Old Colony Planning Council and a grant or something, maybe we can, you know, get it off the ground.
Is the underutilized property, did you do the light control buildings?
I did, the front
Okay.
one, the front building.
The front one? Is
Which-
that the
one
one
that's
that,
closest to Hawks Ave.
is that the one that they were thinking of using, did they
I think-
specify?
I think it's that one.
Okay,
but I'm not 100%. The other building right now is not one that we can sort of do anything with.
okay,
We have to sort of have some remediation,
yes.
and then once that's cleared up, then we could do something with that building. So the grant that I pursued for underutilized is the building that's the closest to Hawks Ave.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I take that back path. I don't feel like dealing with people at the main path.
I mean, the one thing with that property that I think that the town needs to look at, right now, the Light Control Hub or whoever, they own a 40-foot strip that would, in essence, goes across the wooded part of that property.
Yep,
I think it'd be very beneficial to Hanson to look at either purchasing that 40-foot strip or asking them to donate that 40-foot strip so that in essence we could improve Hawks Ave and extend it across our frontage, because then we could split that property into more than one property and
Yeah.
probably get more.
also, I thought conservation was pursuing grant money and potentially even having conversations with Hubble about the piece of property behind the, what do you call it, picture them in
Near Crooker Place and,
Yes.
yeah, in that area.
Now, that is a gem.
Yeah.
I may or may not have trespassed on it, I may or may not have walked on it, but it's amazing back there. It's the backside of Burridge, but the vantage point and the beauty of that piece of property it's amazing.
Yeah, I think they are having conversations.
Yeah, and I would really love, so if they purchased that, then we got the education center going, we would have, Mass Wildlife would have, of course, Burridge, but we'd have that connectivity to Crooker Place, to Main Street, to add additional trails. And as far as I know, it's not particularly buildable. There's some upland there, but the access is really strained to get to it.
Well, it's a commercial industrial zone.
Yeah.
And the wooded portion of the property that's been donated to the town is 99% dry. So there's opportunity there for the town to generate some type of revenue.
Yep.
Speaking of which, the one last thing I'll throw out is 0 West Washington Street, which was the grant we received last year, which is the property adjacent to where the water department is
Yes.
right now.
Yep.
We've kicked that off. Company VHB is going to be doing the engineering. On July 10th, they're going out there to delineate the wetland lines. So it took a while between Mass Development to get the contract all squared away, but I had a kickoff meeting last week. And so that's going to start going full steam ahead. So hopefully before the end of the year, we'll have some type of preliminary working plan to see what could be yielded out of that property.
That's awesome.
And I'm thinking, if we can get something that the town could move on or whatever they want to do with it,
Yeah.
maybe helps close some budget gaps.
Yeah, that would be
Do
awesome.
we have a grant for that?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's
Yeah, that's
under,
how we were able to
yeah,
do it.
that's under a grant.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that, well, we'll use it up before the end of the year, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna spend that money?
Yeah, and so Mass Development has the direct contract with the VHB. So, but yeah, so it's
All right.
kicking
And
off.
then that would give us the ability to decide what we want to do with that property, whether it be selling, develop it,
Right.
renting, I don't know.
Right, if the
whatever.
town sells it on,
Yeah.
obviously, you pay back the grant money.
Yep.
So clearly you wanna get way more than what you got for the grant.
Yeah.
But, if you can yield, at least for one industry, great. If it can yield for more, which is what I'd love to see, it'd be even better,
Yep.
And I think that with the current land prices, I think Hanson could at least generate some revenue out of it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, that brings us to next meeting. What did you,
Thanks, Kimberly.
have you talked to your social
What are we
calendar coordinator?
doing in about a month out? So,
Yeah, I was thinking July 24th. randomly.
24.
It's a Wednesday.
Yeah.
I'll check with Chris. I don't know if he's got any vacation plans or whatever,
Yeah,
but,
do you want to,
let's just
we
like
wouldn't be
pencil
voting
in
on
and
it,
then-
so
Yeah.
we'll just,
So, I will entertain a motion to set the next meeting for July 24th, pending Mr. Ernst's
yeah, I'll
availability.
make the motion for
Well, actually, we
July 24th, but
Can't
I
vote.
don't-
You don't have it
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, so we'll
it's
just
aspirational.
pencil in July
Yeah.
24th without a motion.
Okay. Yeah, so, happy people call me. Okay, then I will, does that work for you guys?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And then, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Okay, so moved.
Well, actually,
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
we're just gonna never adjourn because we don't have the quorum to meet to adjourn, so
Yeah.
this will be the never-ending story again.
Yeah.
Um,
So we'll end the meeting at 6:36 p.m.
Yes, yep.